Hard times don't announce when they're going to end. They don't give reassurance. They just stay longer than you want them to. In this episode, we talk about what it actually means to weather the cold seasons of life without hardening your heart, abandoning yourself, or pretending you're stronger than you are. This conversation is for anyone who feels stuck in a long winter, doing the work, staying sober, showing up, and still wondering whether things will finally shift. My name is Michael Perry, and I'm joined today by Justin Gates. This is the New Ashla Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the New Ashla Podcast, diving into all things holistic, spiritual, psychological, and just overcoming life's challenges. Today, we're going over weathering the hard times in life, those cold winters, because we all go through them. Life is all about those seasons. We talk about that often, don't we, Justin?
We do talk about seasons because we tend to be human in different seasons. It's something that's talked about in many spiritual traditions, and it's a good way to look at things. But not all seasons are the same. That's why we have different things and different things for different seasons, right?
Yep.
Today we're going to be talking about how to stay flexible when this stuff happens.
And also it's really for those people who are going through the season and doing the work, because that was one of the things for me is I started doing the work 24/7, and it's like I just want this to end. And sadly, it's not on our timelines. Patience, right. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn.
Yeah. Well, because sometimes some seasons are really not about growth that we could see or measure, right?
Yeah.
That's because you're not going to have these big breakthroughs or this, you're going to feel like you're rolling in with this huge momentum or progress that you can see. So this is the time, these are the seasons where we must have patience and endurance for sure.
You know, and I think it's important to remind yourself, you're not broken, you're not failing. If anything, this season is likely asking you to build something internal before anything external really shifts. Because realistically, it always starts on the inside. The law of resonance. As above, so below.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really what it took for me. It took a lot of that work, a lot of that self-reflection, a lot of that getting into the mud of it all before life started happening and changing around.
Yeah, well,
it's a struggle.
It is. But it's well worth it, because this is where you learn more about yourself. You learn about where you need to pull together more, where you need to stay present more, right? And where you need to learn patience and endurance, especially in these times where relief, there seems like there's no relief in sight. That's, when the heat gets turned up, the pressure starts coming in. That's when it's time to buckle down, though. That's our sign, right? And, get rid of your expectations about having these huge epiphanies or these huge breakthroughs, because not all seasons are meant for that. But it's all growth. It's all healing if you allow it to be.
Yeah.
Because there is no clear timeline for these things. The seasons come when they come. Like, here in Colorado, it's been a really weird winter. Like, it's been a weird weather season for us, right? It was 50 degrees today. It's like almost the end of January. And it's 50 degrees today. Like, it's crazy, right? We live literally right off the side of the mountain here. And we're only going to be getting, this weekend, we're going to be getting our second snowstorm. But guess what? The whole country's getting a snowstorm, it seems like. So,
yeah.
Right? So we don't always get to pick when the seasons come, but this is about preparing ourselves and tempering our expectations with reality.
Yeah.
Because really, these kind of seasons are what really change us on the inside so that we can change outside.
Yeah. Well, it's like we often talk about how suffering is again one of the greatest things we can experience, as fucked up as that is to say, because suffering is the catalyst for change. It's usually not until things get very difficult are we able to truly change our lives.
Yeah.
There's the law of wisdom that states that if you can understand something and learn the lesson before it happens, then you don't have to suffer the lesson itself. But for many of us, we assume learning the lesson is, I know not to do that. And then we do it anyway.
Right, because we haven't gone through that season of sitting. Right? We haven't gone through that season of where we have to learn patience to endure these things. And again, though, this is where some of the greatest change happens within us. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's prolonged, really, because we get to see just how much we can take. And that's not me saying, Michael, I enjoy your suffering. Boy, howdy, I love to see you suffer. No, I don't like to see you or anybody else suffer. It actually breaks my heart. But I know that you're going to come out of it better, stronger, more resilient, more patient, because you have to keep showing up without any kind of immediate cookie or reward, right? Or any kind of
Yep.
that, because it tests you, not just your strength, but your character. That's where this stuff is built, under pressure. And these slower seasons, these cold seasons, as you're calling it today, they have a way of hardening us. So we need to make sure we talk about how to remain flexible within these times, because flexibility is the key to overcoming all of this stuff, right?
Yep. I know the way I always picture this. I remember when I was going through it in the thick of it, and just the mental image I had was being on a mountainside in a snowstorm with a fire going, and my only
Mm,
goal was to keep that fire glowing enough to stay lit. And sometimes that wind would hit it and it would go down to a shimmer, but as
mm,
long as I protected it, it would always come back. And I
right.
think many people lose themselves in these periods and they let that fire go out. And that's when life really turns to a dark place.
Well, and that's why this episode's important, because we're going to explore why the hard times feel so different, and why it feels like we're not getting anywhere, and why they last longer than what we expect, and why just a few difficult days are manageable, though. Why we can learn to be flexible through it. And sometimes it is days, sometimes it's weeks. Unfortunately, sometimes it can be months, especially if you're dealing with grief.
Even
So
years.
years, even, yeah. But months and years of uncertainty can quietly reshape, how we relate to ourselves in the world. And it's important for us to know how to manage that. Not control it, but manage it as best we can. And another thing that we need to talk about today is the trap of trying to positively think our way out of real pain. The whole positive talk. Positivity is good, but if it's in contrast to reality, then we lose a little bit. We lose some ground there. So positivity is good, but remember, we have to also meet reality where it is. And you cannot think your way out of pain, out of real pain, because the pain's real. I don't care where it came from, it's real, right? So, and again, not because positivity is wrong, but because it becomes harmful when it's used to bypass things like grief or fear or exhaustion.
That was my life before my dark night.
Yeah, right. But you're a living testament to there is a way out. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's
No.
not always a light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes it's a speck of light in a void, right?
Yeah.
And we have to remember that, although, positivity is good, but if we use it to mask reality, it becomes harmful. And that's really one of the points we're going to nail down today.
In the end, it's these cold seasons, they can be rough, but it's true. The results on the other side, if you're able to go through it with integrity, the changes in your life are beyond anything you can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%, dude. Because at the end of this, you would rather look back and say, look what I've become, look what I endured, look how much strength I got, versus um, looking at someone who goes through the same thing. When we all go through this, I don't care, if you're the biggest tough guy on earth, you're going to go through this.
Yep.
It's better to look back and see the strength and endurance and stuff that you've gained, versus someone who's just numb all the time or shutting down because they don't find that strength. They don't believe they have it because they're not giving themselves time to develop that. Yes, some people seem to be born a little tougher than others, but we can all get there, right? So and by the time we get through this episode today, we'll be able to bring that, what you said, to life. When we're sitting outside and it's a blizzard and we got this fire, we're gonna learn how to build that fire and keep it going, no matter how hard the wind blows and how cold it gets. And of course, the metaphor here is building that fire inside, right?
Yeah.
So, because we can't ever count on things from the outside rescuing us.
No. And in fact, like for those codependents out there, because I was guilty of this, when you try to save people from their cold seasons, and they don't get to learn their lessons. They only get the lesson later in much worse conditions. And that's really hard to digest. For me, I was always trying to save people, and I learned the hardest way possible that the more you try to cushion people's falls when they're trying to learn their lessons, the more they're going to face much harsher conditions later on.
Right. Because as we go along, we're really going to reinforce how this resilience is not forged by pretending, by masking, by pretending to be the strong one or pretending to be whatever. We have to face this with truth. And this is where it loses a lot of people. I see a lot of comments on our shows. Well, I won't say a lot of comments. Most of the comments are positive or, participating with the conversation. We do get a few comments here and there. Well, you guys are just snowflakes or whatever. There was this really famous book that talks about how the meek will inherit the earth. And the meek isn't the weak. The meek are the flexible, the ones who can adapt, the ones who can take responsibility and accountability for their spiritual life. So, this stuff we're going to talk about today isn't about pretending. It's about how to, in reality, forge yourself into something that can endure no matter what the circumstances are around you. Because and these seasons, they suck, Michael, but they're really important because they do something really powerful for us. And we may not see it at first, but they're not just testing us. They're not just causing us suffering for the sake of suffering. They reveal us, right?
Yeah.
They bring us out. They forge our self-trust. They shape that inner sovereignty and inner authority. And they teach you what you can carry without losing your humanity. That's another show as to how to endure these things and still remain human, because we all are human until we're not.
Well, it takes me to that quote. It's like, if you pray for strength, God will give you hard times. If you pray for patience, he will make you wait. And it's all in an act to help us grow.
Well, this might sound corny, but it's one of my favorite scenes in what was it? Evan Almighty? No, not Evan Almighty. Yeah, Evan Almighty. Is that the one where he built the boat?
Yes.
Okay. So when Morgan Freeman, who's playing the role of God, is in that little fish and chips place, and she's talking about it, he says something very similar to that. And it's one of my favorite quotes because it's really true. You can't just be given something. That's not how this life works. I don't know exactly why that's how it works, but I just know that's how it works. So,
bare minimal, it teaches you to appreciate it.
Right. So these hard times don't test our mettle against circumstances. They test our identity, right? So why do these long cold seasons feel so personal when they hit?
I think for a lot of people, it feels unfair. It feels unjust.
Mm-hmm.
We begin to question, like, why did this happen to me? And often in life, it is unfair. Like, one of the biggest rules I live by is life is unfair. And it's not that I try to live unfairly. Oh, life is unfair.
It is 100%.
Yeah, and it's not to say play it unfairly or to take advantage of the system, but it's just to understand that not everything's equal. Not everything is... Things will go awry that shouldn't go awry. And that is just how life plays out. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
A tsunami hitting a village, that's unfair. There's countless examples we could give, but I think often we don't take the time to reflect on what's going on in our lives and the parts we play in it. And a lot of the times it's not something we could have controlled or avoided.
Right.
But it's easy to take it personally.
It is, especially because a lot of difficult things in our life happen and they're brief, right? And we usually get into a solve it mode or just a quick phase to get through a passing storm, right? But the key here is these type of seasons, they stretch on, it seems like forever. They stretch on longer than we want, for sure longer than we expect sometimes. And something shifts in us internally, right? The struggle stops feeling like it's external and it starts to feel like it's inside and it's personal. How we hear it all the time. I have the worst luck, or everything bad always happens to me. I hit every damn red light on the way to work, and I'm always late. Things like, those are brief things, but if they happen for a long time and you let your mind get stuck in those, then it seems like forever, and it seems like you do have bad luck. And it can feel personal when things don't improve quickly or at all, right?
Well, it's like the unconscious mind can take it for a ride, right? It starts turning into worthlessness or our failure, and we start making meaning out of things.
Well, it starts asking us or itself, I guess, questions that are far more dangerous than practical ones, right? And you said like questions about our worth. We start questioning our worth. We start questioning our meaning, our failure. Like we start saying, "What the hell's wrong with me?" Right?
Yep.
Why hasn't this changed yet? Which is kind of the central theme of this show today. You know, why we don't feel like all the work we're doing is working yet. Or what does this say about me that I'm still here going through this? I must have really pissed somebody off in another life or something. I hear that one a lot too. But this is where it's time to shift our mindset and kind of ask the question, what is a deeper work here that I must now go through? Right? Because if I bail now, guess what happened? I'm gonna have to write this damn ride again.
Yep.
And again. And again, right?
Yep.
So this thing blurs that line between circumstance and identity. This is where we really start taking it personal, because it's like it's not about what's happening to me or what's happening for me, it's what's happening to me.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Well, you said it perfectly earlier, and it's just as we get into this phase, it's where we really get to meet ourselves. And often that's not a fun thing. It's not a handshake of like, you know what, that's a cool dude right there. You start to see all your insecurities. You start to see all the things that you've been trying to tuck in the rug and run from your whole life. And you got to confront them. And that is something that does take time. And when you're in your darkest moments, you're probably not doing your best work. And that's not a criticism, that's not a judgment. It's just when life is weighing on you, you only have so much bandwidth in a day. And that takes up a lot of it.
Because human beings we are creatures of meaning. We need to find meaning. We need to know everything. Right? We rarely leave a question unanswered in our lives. Right? And when we can't find the answer, and when it goes on for too long, we start doing what? We start filling in the gaps with bullshit.
Yeah.
We start filling it in with stuff that isn't true. Really harsh stuff sometimes. And wildly inaccurate most of the time. Right? Because
More
again,
often than not.
More often than not, because that comes from that place that was long ago, and we're just repeating it because it's all we know. Right? Or another thing we like to do as human beings, we assume that struggle must be some kind of verdict upon us, like on our effort or our character or our worth. You know? I know somebody that I love very deeply, someone that you know and love too, who used to take things as a hit to the character, and it's just like, well, okay, slow down. Let's pause for a minute, because nobody's judging your character. These are storms that are coming through, and we have to deal with them appropriately. It has nothing to do with your character. It has to do with the fact that you exist and this is happening. Let's start there, right? So, because none of this stuff is true about you, right? The stuff that you're saying about yourself. And I sure as hell don't give a damn about what other people say about you.
Right?
They don't live inside your meat suit, man. They don't have to deal with your subconscious. They don't have to deal with all your stuff. So their opinion, unless they're trusted, then probably shouldn't be taken very far. But another reason, and you can take this for me, another reason I think is because these long, cold, hard seasons tend to strip away that external validation. Speaking of other people's opinions, right? It seems to strip that stuff away because we're kind of left with ourselves, aren't we?
Yep. Well, once you start looking at yourself for who you truly are, even if you have external validation, it's not going to mean anything to you because you're now confronting the unconscious part of you that's always whispering in your ear. Now it's yelling in your face. And I mean, you said it perfectly. It's you go from this phase of taking everything personally when someone gives you a comment about something you're doing wrong or a concern they have about you. And again, I like how you say it's like storms passing through. One of the things I've started doing with people is like, if I got a gauge on them and I know they're a little sensitive, I'll start when I bring something up. It's like, I don't mean this with judgment. I don't mean this with criticism, but I'm observing this. And I just wanted to bring it up to you if you want to talk about it.
I'm very curious. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when I do. I say, I'm very curious. And almost all the time I am curious because sometimes it goes against what I would normally think or how I process things, right? I'm more curious because it's like, wow, wait, someone goes about this a different way. It doesn't look like it's working very well, but I want to know what they're going
What's
through.
going on in there?
What's going on in there, seriously, because you know, we certainly won't know everything there is to know. Uh, it's just there's just too much for our little minds to to take it all in at once. But we're only meant to know what we need to know to move forward, and we pick this stuff up along the way. It's why it's always important to think like the student, right? To always be curious. No matter how much you learn, how many papers are on your walls, it says you're such a cool guy, and you got all this cool knowledge or this cool, yeah. It's not wisdom until you apply curiosity and do it. Um, but you know, these long seasons of hardship, people just get so tired, you know, because we get discouraged. Because this stuff, the longer it sits with us, the deeper it goes, and that's by design, right? That's by design. It has to go deeper. It's where the roots are. It has nothing to do with our level of strength, our weakness, but it's simply because we are being tested. Our very sense of self, our very self of being, this sense of being is being tested alongside the circumstances. So it's not just the circumstances; those are just things that are happening. But inside, deep, that's where the work is done, and that's why we have to learn to sit with these things flexibly.
You know, well, and I think one of the important things to note is it's like if we don't sit with curiosity, if we don't remove judgment, not just for others but for ourselves, we should abort the mission. Because when we're approaching anything or anyone with already a story in our heads or a sense of contempt, it leads to judgment, it leads to misinterpretation, it leads to looking for answers that you already think are there instead of being open to whatever is possible.
Fabricating illusion, basically, right? And maybe maybe you don't always abort unless especially if you can start noticing these things inside you, because once you start noticing them, then you can start to work to change them, to replace that judgment with curiosity. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Trust me, bro.
I think another important part when we start taking things personally or when we start going through these cold seasons and it starts dragging itself out longer, often we can end up getting into this freeze mode. And I think it's important to identify this because often we confuse this freeze mode for endurance.
Right. But just like patience, endurance is a conscious thing. It's a living thing. We are actively doing endurance, right? Even though it may not want to. And this sense of freezing is just us disconnecting and disassociating. We say, connection is heaven, disconnection is hell, because we need to be actively involved in this process as much as it sucks. So, the enduring is our active participation.
Yeah. So when does it shift from endurance to freezing?
Well, it happens. It can happen in lots of ways, but it happens when we just start getting tired, as we talked about earlier. That's one way it happens. We just get wore down and wore down and wore down, and we allow ourselves to start listening to the lies. You can't do this. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not this or that. And it's really hard to endure when we start believing those lies. But on the surface, they, as you said, they look very similar. Both kind of quietly sit there sometimes, and both look like we're being disciplined and restrained, right? And both really feel like strength, depending on what part of the peak or valley in this thing we're in. But internally, they are very different, and confusing the two carries a really long-term cost. That trap is bad. So we'll start with endurance. Endurance is a choice. It is that active decision, that conscious decision to remain present as long as you can with whatever's happening, with that difficulty, and letting it instead of letting it hollow you out, emptying you out, and just driving you insane almost.
Well, that's the moneymaker right there.
Well, yeah, because endurance involves feeling and experiencing what's happening while still staying connected. Remember, endurance is connection, freezing is disassociating and disconnecting. So you have to sit with it. Remember, we talked about at the very beginning of the show, this is a practice of sitting with what's happening. You don't have to like it. You won't. I don't. I go through cold seasons to this day sometimes. We all do. But sitting with it is what enduring looks like. But you stay connected to yourself. You still hold on to your values. You still hold on to your character. You still hold on to your meaning and purpose, whatever it is you're striving for, right? Whatever's defining you. And it's alive, man. It's alive. That's like the biggest takeaway for me. Endurance is life. It's what we do. All living things endure, whether they want to or not.
Yeah. You know, presence was such a perfect point to bring up, because the one I was going to bring up is dissociation and numbness. You know, I've been
Hmm.
there where it's like back in the day, it's like I go through something and it's like I am just going to distract myself into oblivion. And that is what I do nonstop until it passes. But it's not passing, it's repressing. And presence is what you got to do. You know, it's again, seasons don't have to be months, years, weeks. I had a rough day today and I felt my the voice in my head. I started being like, maybe I need to find a new job. This isn't good. I started feeling my flight reflexes kicking in, and it's like, hold on a minute, like, all right, let's just sit in this, because that's not rational thinking. And you know, after a couple hours of sitting in that ugliness, it went away.
Well, that's the thing, right? Endurance is an active choice. Feels like a choice, but it's not. It's a response. It's a reaction. The
Yep.
body never forgets. The body never
It
forgets,
doesn't.
right? Um, and the longer this goes on, we may start giving up and giving over control to the automated system that's been programmed in our bodies. So, and you're right. It looks like numbing, and it looks like muted emotions, or you don't find curiosity in things, and you certainly probably lose hope after a while, right?
Yeah.
And this feels like stability for a minute because it's familiar. It's the go-to. It's the fail-safe, the go-to, but it's not a choice. Don't get it messed up. Freezing is not a choice. One is, one's not, and that's where the big difference is. One is a choice. One, it requires you to be active. One means you're alive, right? And the other is just an automatic response that your body will do when you can't endure any longer.
Well, it's like you always say, it's finding that middle ground between reaction and response, or
Yes,
taking that pause, because it's like right there, it's like that would have been a moment where it's I let it overwhelm me. I start letting my thoughts spiral. I start letting it take me down a rabbit hole for however long it needs to, and it's like, no, this my thoughts are not. And that's one thing I got to point out here is when we're processing emotions, when we're sitting with the heaviness, thinking our way through it leads to building more of that negative emotion. To process an emotion, you must do it in your
you must do it in your being. Yes,
yeah.
the whole thing, right? That's why we see a lot of people who survive hard times by emotionally shutting down, right? And others will say, "Oh, you're so strong. You're so strong." No, you're. But to be clear, this is not a moral failure. This is not some kind of, get out of here, you piece of crap. It's not that. It's not a moral failure. It's simply, as we say a lot, it's a survival strategy. It's your go-to, keep you alive, right? Can't be mad at that, but we can start to learn to regain some control,
Yeah.
because this going from endurance to freezing is really just an act of self-protection, as in a lot of things we talk about.
Yeah.
Even emotionally shutting down is an act of self-preservation for many, right?
Well, it's like the four types of trauma responses, right? I mean, you either get aggressive, you get angry, yelling in people's face, you know, freeze, you lock up, you shut down, flee, you feel the need to run, or fawn, you feel
Right.
the need to comfort, to accommodate, to make peace with.
Right. And here's a trap that we really should be careful of, right? When this becomes the default state, when freezing becomes that default state, the numbness, the disassociation, the disconnection, we don't just lose access to the pain, which we do in some way. It finds a way of coming back, by the way, but we also lose access to joy and intuition and empathy and connection if we're not careful, right? Sure, life becomes somewhat manageable from time to time, but it becomes flat over long periods of time, right? You may learn to function this way, but you also start to become distant,
Start
and the
isolating.
world and ourselves become muted. But this hard thing, the living thing, the active response, endurance keeps us engaged with life, with ourselves, especially when it's hard. And that's the best time to practice this, because we always fall back to our what? Our lowest
The
level
lowest
of
level of
training
training.
or healing, right? That's just the fact. The real danger here between these two is that it's easy to confuse the two things. And we're creatures of comfort, man. We like to feel as good as we can, even when it's not good for us in the long term. So,
Well, I think one of the hardest parts when we're going through these hard times is motivation. You know, we think it's something that we're anticipating to come to us, that one day I'm going to feel motivated to start making change in my life. I'm going to be motivated to
right,
start doing what I need to get my life on track. And it's okay to have that lull after a hard period, you know? Sometimes that
yeah,
blizzard hits and you just need, your only goal is to survive. But there comes a
right.
point in this long night where you got to start changing your behaviors. When when you start doing the work, you start going from analysis mode to action mode.
Right. And those things tend to spark motivation for short bursts, right, of speed.
You know,
But don't get it messed up here, man. These long cold seasons, there is no reward for all your hype and all your inspiration. It exposes those things
yeah.
as either helpful or not, or real or not. Because, and we talked about motivation as a fuel for goals, right? A few shows back, during at the end of the last year, we talked about that. But motivation is fueled by momentum, by feedback, but most importantly by visible progress. We get to see those little markers, and they help drive us to the next spot, right? But as we talked about earlier today, these kind of long seasons, there isn't a lot of progress that we can see, because it's all happening really deep as we sit with it. So motivation kind of falters here. It doesn't manifest the way it normally would, or the way we hope it would, because motivation kind of sparks when effort is met with response. But again, these long cold seasons offer very little of that, don't they?
I mean, I'd say very often what motivates you is just knowing that change is necessary. Because, like you said, I mean, things get worse before they get better. And that is one of the hardest truths to the healing scene, because it's true. As you start confronting these things, you will not feel more motivated to just keep confronting them unless you have an ongoing problem in your life. You know,
Or,
it's,
or, or you love pain and suffering, which I don't know
yeah,
many people who do.
right. Give me more of that.
It really sucks. Right. Give me some more, universe, please. But look, it's easy to be motivated when there's like the clapping, hey, good job, or immediate reward after reward, or some clear indicator that what you're doing is actually working for you. These longer seasons tend to not do those things. So again, motivation becomes something that's it's not bad or wrong. It's just unreliable,
Yeah.
right? At the end of the day, it's just unreliable.
The season is demanding
Because, like you
this.
said, right? Well, because and you said it. We wait around to feel ready.
Yep.
I'm just gonna sit here until I feel ready, or I'm gonna sit here until I feel hopeful again.
Yeah.
And you sit and you anticipate and you expect this great surge of energy and clarity that will make this all feel easier. But again, these don't work that way. They don't meet you where you feel inspired, do they? They meet you where you're like, and this is to your point, they meet you where you are willing to be disciplined.
Well, it's an intrinsic motivation, right? Because nothing extrinsic. One thing you'll learn in these seasons is you can't buy your way out of it. You can't sleep your way out of it. You can't drink your way out of it. You might be able to temper the storm a little bit and pretend it's not there, but that blizzard will just come back harder.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about the kind of discipline that's, punishment. I'm talking about learning to still yourself, learning to find peace in the storm, learning to become that anchor that we talk about.
Treat it as small acts of
Doesn't
self respect.
Right, right. Sitting with these habits long enough to make them into long-term habits. And just like you said, small acts repeated consistently. Even, I shouldn't say even when, especially when there is no sort of reward attached, emotionally or otherwise, because there probably won't be. So, just kind of like a couple of questions that each of these seasons would ask us. A warmer season or a funner season, a better season, maybe. I don't know how to put that, but those will ask us as we're growing and healing. They'll ask us, hey man, what excites you? Michael, what excites you, right?
Yeah.
What gets you going? What gets you motivated? What these long cold seasons ask of us, what in you can be trusted even when you don't feel like it,
Well said.
because it is about that. It is about that. But this is where you forge that authority over your being. And for those of you who keep throwing comments in the damn shows about I'm bad mouthing the Bible, I'm not talking about any kind of other authority other than the authority that you have as a sovereign being over your damn emotions and over your. I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to. I see you out there. I appreciate your interactions, but I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea. I have no idea. You know, one of these days I'm just going to read. Just going to do a show where I'm reading all the comments that I have no idea where they come from or why they apply to whatever we were talking about because they usually don't. And then we're just going to have fun with that. And maybe these guys could help us answer those questions because I have no
Us
idea.
darn round earthers.
Weird. It's just I'm just like for a little bit of context for you guys. Just we'll take a little break here real quick. Just for context, I threw a couple of our random shows up on Facebook and kind of put them out in an ad to get more reach. And one of them was the show on New Year's resolutions, like making goals that work, and the other one was about self-trust, building self-trust. Kind of a more recent show. And I had comments in there about somebody quoted like 16 different verses in Deuteronomy about cleanliness and uncleanliness, spiritual cleanliness, and all this for the New Year's resolution show, which I still don't know what the heck they were talking about or, trying to imply. And the other one was about the building of self-trust. There was a comment that basically was a lecture about how we're all stupid and everything is flat, and I don't even know why that. I don't remember talking about the earth in that show, Michael. I thought we were talking about self-trust. I'll have to go back and listen to it. Maybe I'll find what I was talking about.
They were testing our
Just
self-trust.
some weird. The internet is such a bizarre place sometimes. Anyways, but we have to build discipline in these times because we can't sit around and wait for things to happen or come rescue us or whatever. It's up to us. It's up to us, And waiting and avoiding isn't laziness. It's just you're just trying to survive. But the longer you learn to sit in this stuff, the more trust you're going to have for yourself. Going back to self-trust, and the more times you can do that, the small, little, tiny things that can become habits for you, right? So,
well, and this is so important because this is the things that keep that fire going. It's what builds that heat. So I think that's what we should dive into next is just sort of what strategies can we incorporate to start keeping this fire going and helping us weather this storm and work our way out of it. Often people think it's about chasing relief, but realistically, it's like you said, being present.
Well, and the thing here is piggybacking off discipline, these things happen in stages, and we do little things to practice that discipline. We do little things to keep that fire going, right? Because we have to be prepared for when outside relief is not coming. We have to be able to, right, to be able to handle things when the cavalry isn't coming. And, one of the great misunderstandings here in these hard seasons is that someone will come. I will be rescued. And that's not always the case, unfortunately.
Well, and sadly,
or maybe not being rescued. Well, I was just going to say maybe not even being rescued or find relief, but we're waiting for something to change outside of us so that, we can finally take a break on the inside.
I was just going to add when it comes to someone coming to our rescue, I mean, often if we do have someone who shows up that helps us tamper that, gives us some relief, that can be one of the most dangerous things we can encounter during the season because it can halt us from learning the lessons. And it's to be mindful that we can have those who support us in our lives and we can lean on them when times get hard. But it's important that you're doing the work internally and using internal motivation to help get you through that.
And look, I know it sounds like yet again we're picking on higher powers here, but we're not. We have to take responsibility and accountability for parts of our life. We just have to, regardless of what we believe, regardless of what external higher power is there that's got our back. Where do you think these lessons come from? We talked about it earlier. When we beg for courage, we don't just magically feel courageous, right? We are given things to make us courageous. So, but we have to stop waiting for someone else to take care of it. We have to take action. These are the lessons that these long seasons teach us. Because really, in between waiting and sitting, if we don't learn how to keep this fire going, we're vulnerable in a bad way. Because if we're waiting for comfort or waiting for reassurance or waiting for rescue, if that's our primary strategy, We are just simply at the mercy of the circumstances around us. This even applies to real life survival. Like if you're out in the woods, right, and you're waiting, you're waiting to be rescued. You don't just sit there and freeze to death while you wait. You got to try to do something. Same kind of thing applies here, right? Would you say?
Yeah. Well, again, it's when you have something externally you're hoping is going to keep you warm. You're not learning how to cultivate warmth yourself. Inner heat is created through things like honesty, routine,
Mm-hmm.
boundaries, and above all, refusing to abandon yourself. These are the logs that you have to place upon this fire to keep the fire going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's nothing that comes from outside of ourselves. True self trust is something that is cultivated within yourself and not through outside affirmation.
Right. Because you have to be honest about what's actually happening and not minimizing or dramatizing it. Right? When you stop lying to yourself about how hard something is, you really conserve precious energy that would otherwise be spent maintaining that bullcrap narrative that you're living through.
That which you resist persists.
Routines. That's right. Routines are important. We say this a lot because that's how we build the best habits, right? Because those things are what remains no matter what kind of mood we're in. Because these things have to be sustainable, or else why bother?
Boundaries, it's about being able to stand up for
Boundaries.
yourself in these moments. It's being able to
Yeah.
say no when you need to, or say yes when you need to. Often when we get in these lulls, it's really hard for us to get out of our comfort zone. We'll have people, hey, let's get out and do something. You've been locked away in your house for 2 weeks, and it's just like, I don't want to do that. Well, maybe I should do that.
Right. Well, that's why it's really important, again, to build a really trusted circle of people and find a higher power that's got your back. But boundaries, you have to know and establish and enforce the things you will no longer tolerate. I'm not going to tolerate this crap anymore, right? No matter what mood you're in, no matter how tired you are or not, refusing to overextend yourself, over-explain yourself, or abandon your boundaries and limits just to keep the peace, which isn't real peace. So, and boundaries help the fire stay contained without burning like crazy. We talked about this in the last show, I think, about passion. In the show we did about using the Unity Mind Code as a good framework for shadow work, we talked about passion. Passion's good if it's a campfire versus a wildfire. So boundaries are important for that. But I think where some people lose the plot, drop the plot here, or lose the plot, I should say, is when they disconnect from what they actually need, because either they're not honest about it, or they don't set good boundaries, or they haven't built enough repetition around it to make it a good habit. And again, then our intuition takes blah, blah. Scratch that. Our intuition takes a hit, right? And we just get walked all over. And then we just teach our body, yep, this is the new norm. It's okay for people to walk over us to get overextended and react instead of respond.
Well, those are hard habits to break. Like, often those are the type of things that follow us into the cold night, and that's what the cold night's teaching us to confront. To learn that we need to put ourselves first, to be 51% selfish and 49% selfless, depending on what type of metrics you need. I know for me, being a codependent, that's what I realized I had to enforce in myself.
Yeah. It's about finding balance. Wherever you are, you must move in one direction or the other, right? To kind of balance that stuff out. But, finding this place, finding this peace, this inner stillness, this fire, as we're calling it today, keeps us from becoming resentful and numb and flexible without sacrificing our strength. So,
And I think one of the most important things when you're going through these hard nights, these cold winters, to remember is you gotta stay soft. You can't let these times of our lives callous us and make us hard to life. There's a certain level of being strong. There's a certain level of confidence, of being discerning of the people in our lives and the situations we go through. But if we lose the flexibility of being soft, so much of life is cut off to us.
yeah, this is the meekness I was talking about, that Christ talked about. That taught. It's often misunderstood as weakness, or, oh, you're so soft. You're too soft, Michael. You're so weak and passive. No, that's not what we're talking about. This type of strength, and it can be incredible amounts of strength too, to be flexible and to be meek in these times.
stay emotionally
But
open.
in these colder seasons, yes, in these colder seasons, it's not something that you drift into. It is something you forge, right? And like anything worthwhile, it requires effort and awareness and restraint. It does not mean become a sponge either. We're not talking about SpongeBob SquarePants here. Not absorbing everything. It does not mean tolerating harm again, or over explaining, or giving up your boundaries for peace.
Yeah, being soft still
That's not
requires you to
softness.
have
That's
boundaries.
abandonment. Right. It does. Exactly. Those things I just said are more like self-abandonment, not, softness or meekness or flexibility. I like to use the word flexibility because people understand that. But it's good for them to hear it this way too, because we all explain things differently. Jesus called it meek. Some call it soft. I call it flexibility. We're all talking about strength, though. None of those other things.
And it's an active
And again,
practice.
like all, it is because it has to become a discipline, right? I think you said that. This state of being is a discipline, and it requires the self-honesty, and it requires the active choices and things that we talk about.
And it's
It
not easy,
requires us to,
sometimes being open when we want to close down. Being able to confront ourselves when we just want to look away and rest. It's hard.
well, and it's a discipline. Think of it like as a discipline of not becoming what external hardships try to make you or try to shape you into. It's not a discipline of cynicism, of allowing yourself to become cruel or closed off, as you said. It's about being open, because all those other things would be easier. They would feel easier anyway. And it's a type of discipline of strength that allows us to control our emotions, to control our reactions, to control the things of us that we can't control, no matter what's happening around us. And again, this is not something that makes us fragile. It makes us strong.
So why is being strong, and this is loosely being used, something that often delays healing?
Because a lot of that strength, you said loosely defined, all that strength is just a lot of masking, a lot of pretending, right?
Yeah, and that's not
We
what our higher
learn
power is
that.
asking of us.
No. You just had to learn to and this is not really enduring in the sense, but you had to learn to just deal with things that were bad for you or you didn't like or whatever without complaint, by the way, and hold it together. And this is your life. Just push it down and be strong. Be strong. No, you never need help, Michael. Don't ever ask for help. Don't slow down. Just keep grinding and grinding and grinding until you die at your desk at the age of 58. You know what I mean? Just push it down and deal with it. Don't complain, though. If
Ain't no
that's
rest for the
strength,
wicked.
I don't want to be strong. If that's strength, I don't want to be strong. But there is, again, there is a reason for it. Is we're trying to survive because that's the environment we came up in, or the environment that we put ourselves in even after that. We keep coming back to those environments. But healing strength is different than survival strength. What is the biggest difference between those two, would you say?
I'd say it's pushing through situations without feeling. It's trying to bypass everything and just muscle through those times. It's trying to keep your
The
head
survival
up.
strength.
Yeah. Survival strength is where
Okay,
you're
gotcha.
looking forward without handling what's going on around you or what's happened to you. It's running from your problems instead
Yeah.
of confronting them head on.
Well, this is why a lot of people, and we all know people like that, and I'm probably guilty of this too. Why it seems like we can endure incredible amounts of hardship and but also still feel stuck years later, right? We had the strength to survive, push through it, take no prisoners, but we were never really taught or gave ourselves permission to become flexible or to soften, as you say. But healing asks for a different type of strength, doesn't it? And it's not less strength. It's more integrated strength. It includes sensitivity. I know that's such a dirty word for some of you alphas out there, right? It's so sensitive. Don't be sensitive. This strength requires sensitivity. And it allows ourselves to feel without overwhelming the entire system, to work through these things, call them out, be honest, and one that recognizes these things are not failures. They are what? They're information. How can we learn better if we don't know better, right? How can we do better if we don't learn to know better? So this kind of strength, the healing strength, knows when to stay steady and when to slow down. The pause, right? One example. It knows when to act, and when to listen. It understands that we push through our limits wisely and methodically, not just pushing through it for the sake of getting through it. There's a purpose to this type of strength, right? And this strength often has more presence involved than the other. And I would even dare to say, like I did with endurance and freezing, that this healing strength is a choice and the other one isn't so much of a choice. There's a big differences there.
Often, when we try to muscle our way through hard situations, not only do we avoid the lessons, but we keep our nervous system locked. It's exactly what creates a hardness to ourselves that's so hard to reverse down the road, because we end up creating beliefs and perceptions around things that are misinformed because of the traumas we have gone through. And it can become so dangerous because we end up projecting that on the world.
But there is a harmony between these two. There can be. There should be. Normally
needs
is,
to be.
right? Because again, healing requires strength and sensitivity. We have to be strong enough to remain engaged, to endure. We have to choose to actively participate in that. And we need to be sensitive to the information that our body and our mind and our soul and wherever else the information is coming from. We need to be sensitive to it so we can understand what is being asked of us, right? But that balance is what allows survival energy to transform itself into restorative energy. And that's how we train our body, our mind, to align with what's happening now in the present, not what we're worried about in the future, not what we're scared of from the past. But you have to let your body learn that lesson too, so that it will remember that. Again, you fall back to your lowest level of healing. It's just how we're built. It's just how we're built.
These cold seasons will put you right there, that's for sure. So, what do you think these hard times often are teaching people? What are some of the common themes?
I think one of the big ones that comes to mind is that the lies and stories that you've told yourself about who you were, who you are, when and then and now and never and later and all these things, when life was easier. These seasons dismantle these identities built on false momentum and these false affirmations, or they just dismantle the illusion if you sit with them long enough. And again, they do this without explanation, sometimes without grand ceremonies or applause, and very rarely without comfort. So that's one thing. That's one thing they teach us.
Often I notice
What's another?
depending on the person you are, I always talk about the scale, right? Assertive, passive. And I feel a lot of people's dark nights fall into teaching them lessons around that. I know for me, my dark night was that this cold season I went through is that I had to put myself first, that I had to stop putting people's needs before my own, that I had to stop emptying myself from an empty cup. And sometimes what it's teaching us is that we must release the need for control. We must trust others. We must not have walls up with the people we love.
Yeah. It's funny, our dichotomy here. You have to go one way, I have to go the other, right?
Right.
And you know this from personal experience, I walk into a room and people are like, oh shit, what's happening? And I don't mean to, but I try to learn to orient myself this way, where you have to go this way, right? But something else these cold seasons teach us is who you are when nothing else is working. Like, it strips you down to your lowest level of training, your lowest level of practice, your lowest level of healing, because your effort doesn't really produce a lot of tangible results. Support may be limited or inconsistent at best. And those practices that once got you excited or got you motivated now feel really, really not like that. Distant even.
It's like you're pushing a boulder uphill. It's like, do I really want to keep doing this? But you do. You do want to keep pushing that boulder.
You do. But I think the biggest thing for me always was these times, they help me strip away just the illusions. They allow truth to come through, reality, right? Because you'll learn where your sense of worth is, if it's rooted in outcomes or in integrity. Or you'll learn whether your faith depends on reassurance or relationship with higher power or with yourself or with trusted others, right? You learn whether or not your values are situational or if they are embodied at your bones, right? These seasons really do a good job of that too. Again, they strip you and they show you who you are and where you can improve.
And it's a beautiful thing because when you
really
do
a good job of
finally
preparing.
Say what?
I was just saying they just do a really good job of preparing us for the much larger things, and there's always a bigger fish, right? They always, but they're good at preparing us too.
I look at it like the circle of life, and there's all these inner rings, and it's like we're at this ring, and this cold winter storm we're going through is to help us reach that next outer ring to expand into this, if we so choose. Though a lesson you taught me a long time ago that just I always think about is how life will come and knock on your door, and you can choose to answer it or not. But if you don't listen to what it has to tell you, it's going to come and it's going to start banging on your door. Then it's going to come and kick the door down. And if you're not listening at that point, then
Hmm.
a hurricane's going to come and wipe your house out.
Yeah, it can. That's a very dramatic of me to say it like that, but it
It's
does
how
feel
it
that way
retained in
sometimes
my
if we
brain.
ignore it.
And that is how it felt for me. I had a
Well, I mean,
hurricane.
but sometimes it does. It seems like, you know, because these things are all trying to tell us something. Care what word you use for it, triggers or traumas or information or whatever. They're all the same thing. All I want you to take away from this, I don't care what words you use. That part's not important to me. It's that you will signal yourself when things need to change. And if you ignore that, which you can. You're a sovereign free will human being, right? I wouldn't for long. That's all I'm going to say. I wouldn't for long.
You know,
Yeah.
I think another important part to this is often these lessons are teaching us about faith. That we have to have faith in others, we have to have faith
Hmm.
in ourselves, and we have to have faith that everything's going to work out because it always does. You, I can guarantee, have survived 100% of the things you have gone through. And that's a
Here
fact.
you are.
Yep.
Yeah. Here you are. It's good to see you. I'm glad you made it through all that stuff. Here you are.
You're going to make it through this
What are we
too.
ready for next? You will. You will. I promise. Hold me to that because I will too.
Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners?
Yeah, so just a couple of things. These real hard seasons, it feels like they're asking us to become harder, right? To harden ourselves to become like the circumstances. It's not true though. What they're really asking us is to be more honest. We need to be more present. We need to try and remain as more open. Even though the other sounds closing off feels safe, we need to try and keep our integrity intact when these things happen because relief may not be anywhere in sight. We don't know. But these seasons change us, Michael. Not because they're cruel, not because we are horrible people and 30 lifetimes ago. It's because these things must strip away our illusions so that what we are and what we are authentically can be revealed. They show us who we are and what we are when everything familiar falls away. Because for a lot of us, the familiar is an illusion. It's not true. They show us whether our strength is rooted in performance or presence. What do we always say? Presence over perfection, presence over performance.
And that is so
Show
important during
up.
these times.
Show up. It is. So, just do your best to try and practice this kind of discipline where we learn to endure. The more you do it, the stronger you will be, and you won't even recognize yourself years later. I promise you that. But if you're in one of these cold seasons right now, I just want you to understand you're not failing in your practices. You're not failing and you're not weak. You just need to set up some structure for yourself instead of inspiration. You're not lost because the path is slow. It's slow because you need to really understand and practice and build discipline. So stay honest and stay disciplined and stay flexible. Those things will get you far. And I just have one little call of action today, and I hope it's not one of your journaling prompts because I didn't check. But if you're in one of these cold seasons now, do yourself a favor. Don't try to fix everything at once. Okay? Choose one small act of self-respect. We'll start there. That's an important one
That's a
that you
good
can
one.
commit to every day. Something simple, something that's sustainable though, right? Rooted in reality. Something that does not rely on motivation. Let it be, just it could be something like staying present with yourself and staying there for 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 30 seconds if that's all you can get to right now. And pay attention to where you may be trying to avoid or numb instead of enduring. Notice where you're pushing through without feeling or waiting for some kind of burst of inspiration instead of building real actual discipline and structure. You know, and don't, again, we always say don't judge yourself. Stay curious. All you're interested in is gathering information, right? Practice staying flexible in one specific way. I'm not going to tell you which way, but it could be like telling the truth about how you're actually feeling or doing, or holding a boundary that you've been avoiding. And we all have plenty of opportunities for that at work, at school, at Walmart, wherever. Always somebody trying to step and push the damn boundaries. So, and maybe find a spot where you can slow down instead of hardening. And again, let flexibility be an intentional thing. Always look. Always at the end of the day, train yourself, practice, so that you can make choices about things and not just react to things. I think that's the biggest takeaway today for me.
That's beautiful. You know, for me, the takeaways I want you to get from this episode is stop asking when the season will end and start asking how you're showing up inside of it. Notice where you're numbing instead of grounding. Replace motivation with non-negotiable structure. Let the cold sharpen you without letting it harden you, and measure progress by integrity, not outcomes. For affirmations today, I do not abandon myself just because life feels heavy right now. I am allowed to move slowly without losing my direction. I can feel the cold without hardening my heart. I trust the version of me that is being built in this discomfort. And I remain grounded in integrity, even when results are not visible. For our journaling prompts, where in my life am I trying to escape discomfort instead of learning how to stay present with it? This is a big one because those are the things that will be where the most work needs to be done, possibly where the lessons are hiding. What parts of me are being strengthened in this season, even if nothing external has changed yet? Because there are things being strengthened, whether it's just resiliency itself. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please check us out, subscribe, share if you think this is going to help someone you know, and leave a comment if you want to bring up discussion around this. We'd love to talk to you. So again, check us out on the socials.
Even the crazy ones, go ahead.
YouTube, Spotify,
even
TikTok,
the crazy ones.
Insta. We're all over. Yeah, even the crazy comments. Bring it on. Also, check out the best website ever, newashla.com. With love and gratitude, Ad Lucem.
Ad Lucem.